If you're familiar with this book, it might be because you read a piece in the New York Times Magazine about how Target was studying shoppers' habits in order to determine if some of their female customers were pregnant. Or you might have seen a piece in Sunday in the paper about how the Obama and the Romney campaigns were studying voting habits in order to try and entice low-propensity voters into the booths. But what I want to talk to you about today is I want to talk to you about a product that you might not have heard about, or maybe some of you have, named Febreze. And I'm going to admit at the outset that I'm going to try and trick you. Because what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and convince you that we are living through this golden age of understanding the science of habit formation. We're learning more and more about how habits work. And that the same things that made Febreze into a hit that you can use within your own companies or within your own lives to make the world a better place. So you can tell me at the end if I'm actually successful at this. And in order to do this, I first have to start by telling you about a rat. So about a decade ago, there was a woman named Dr. Anne Graybiel at MIT who's a neurologist. And for years, she had been doing experiments to try and get sensors into the craniums of rats so that she could measure what was going on inside their heads as they went about their daily business. As you can imagine, it took a long time and a lot of rats to figure out how to do this. But eventually, she got to a point where she could get about 150 sensors into a rat's cranium. And she would do the same thing with every single rat. After the surgery, she would take them and she would put them in the world's simplest maze. This maze works the same way every single time. There's a click, the partition moves, and the rat is free to run up and down. Now, if anyone's ever done this with a rat, what you know is that when you drop a rat in a maze like this, it looks like the world's stupidest animal. The rat will actually sort of run up and down the center aisle and sniff and scratch. They'll get to the end and it'll actually see the chocolate and then go the opposite direction. This is actually one of the reasons why rats are used in experiments, is because it's considered that if you can teach a rat something, you must be able to teach any animals anything. And so she would do this experiment, but for the first time, she was able to see what was going on inside the rat's head. This is a simplified neurological graph of the first time that a rat is dropped in this maze. And what you'll notice is that its brain is actually working hard the entire time. So when the rat would scratch on the walls, its scratching centers would light up. When it would sniff, its sniffing centers would light up. The rat was actually trying to process as much information as possible. This is what learning looks like. So Dr. Graybiel takes the rats, each one, she drops them in 100 times, 150 times. And as you imagine, over time, the rats learn how to navigate through the maze faster and faster and faster. Click, partition moves, the rat will make a beeline to the chocolate. It actually becomes a habit. But what's really interesting is that Dr. Graybiel sees for the first time what's going on inside the rat's cranium. As the rat gets faster and faster, as the habit to find the chocolate becomes stronger and stronger, the rat essentially thinks less and less and less. This graph at the bottom is a simplified neurological graph of the 150th iteration of a rat running through a maze. And that dip you see right there, that's the same dip that you would see if a rat went to sleep. Now, there was a scientist at Duke University a couple of years ago who did a study to try and figure out how much of your day was habits. She followed a whole bunch of people around. And she found that about 40 to 45% of the actions we take every day aren't really behaviors. They're actually just habits. And if I could somehow stick 150 sensors into your head, which I would not recommend, then when I saw you backing your car out of your driveway or walking down the hall and muttering to yourself or making automatic decisions, I would see your brain looking like this. But what's interesting is if you notice, there's these two spikes in neurological activity, right? When there's the click, we see a burst of neurological activity, and then essentially the brain kind of almost goes to sleep. And then the rat finds the chocolate, and it's as if the brain sort of wakes itself up again to pay attention to what's going on. This is the neurological signature of a habit. This is what we've discovered in the last 6 years. And this is so important that it's become enshrined in psychology and neurology as what's known as the habit loop. We now know that every habit has 3 components. There's a cue, which is like a trigger for an automatic behavior to start. And then there's a routine, which is the behavior itself. And then finally, a reward. And the reward is how your brain, and in particular part of your brain named the basal ganglia, learns to remember this pattern for the future. And for centuries, when people thought and talked about habits, they always focused on the routine, on the behavior. But what we've learned is that it's actually the rewards and the cues that shape how habits work. That's how we influence how people behave on the most automatic, almost subconscious level. Just to give you an example, let me tell you about an experiment that was done in Germany where they took about 700 people and they wanted to get them to exercise. So they took one group and they told them to choose a cue, like go running at the same time every day, or always put your clothes next to your bed. And then they told them that when they got home from working out, they should eat a small piece of chocolate, which of course is counterintuitive because we all exercise in order to lose weight, not to eat chocolate. But what they found, and the reason why they found this, is that people who did this exercise twice as much habitually as other people. And the reason why is because you might think that you want to exercise, but your brain thinks that you are a dirty liar and that you hate exercise. And so in order to convince your basal ganglia that you should actually form this habit, you have to pair the activity with a reward you genuinely enjoy, like chocolate. And over time, your brain will learn the endorphins, the endocannabinoids, the neurotransmitters that are released by physical activity are a pleasurable sensation, and you'll start exercising habitually and you'll stop eating the chocolate on your own. But as I mentioned, the entire reason I'm telling you about this is because I want to talk to you about Febreze. Does anyone here use Febreze? Is anyone a Febreze customer? Okay, a couple of people. So Febreze, for those of you who don't know what it is this chemical that I cannot pronounce, but the initials are HPBCD. That was discovered about 11 years ago by Procter & Gamble. This guy who was a smoker was working in the lab one day, and he used this chemical, and when he got home, he noticed that he didn't smell like cigarette smoke anymore. And what he figured out was that this chemical, if you aerosolize it, you can spray it onto fabric or other things, and it will draw out the molecules, the scent molecules, and as it evaporates, the scent will essentially disappear. This is a huge deal for Procter & Gamble because for years consumers had been saying that they wanted some product that would not just mask bad smells but make them disappear. So this guy goes to his bosses at Procter & Gamble and he says, I think I can make this into a product, and they give him $7.5 million, and 3 years later he comes up with Febreze, this product that they're going to sell. And the executives turn around and they say, we need to give this to one of our top marketing teams because we think we can make $1 gazillion off of this. So they give it to this guy named Drake Stimson, who used to be a mathematician on Wall Street. He has a whole bunch of psychologists, consumer psychologists, working with him. And they come up with what they think is a brilliant advertising campaign. It's modeled around a habit loop. The cue is going to be, if you have a bad smell in your life, you're going to spray Febreze, and it's going to get rid of the bad smell. And everyone's going to get rich. So they make a couple of test ads because they wanted to test this out. And they actually showed them in 3 markets, including here in Scottsdale, where this is one of the test markets. Let me show you one of them.
Guess what the kids call Dad's easy chair?
The stinky chair.
You know, I have a stinky chair problem too. His name is George. Well, now there's a way to get bad smells out of fabrics for good. It's called Febreze. It's new, and you won't believe how many places you'll find to spray it. See, Febreze helps clean fabrics in a way you never could before.
And it's not just covering one smell with another.
Exactly. Just spray Febreze. Its patented cleaning system finds the smells trapped in fabrics and gently cleans them away as it dries. And once it's dry, the smell's gone. For good.
Febreze, check the launcher out.
And check this out.
It's safe, from dress blues to teddy bears. Febreze cleans bad smells out of fabrics. For good.
I wonder if they'll call it the sleepy chair now.
What I kind of like about this ad is you forget that the late 90s had a visual aesthetic until you actually see it in an old commercial. So they take this ad, and this ad actually won awards before it even aired. This was considered a model of explaining a new technology to consumers. And right, you watch this thing and you know what Febreze does. It's pretty clear. They roll it out in these three test cities. They send people tons and tons of free product. Actually, Drake Stimson told me that they were so certain that they were going to just knock us out of the park that one afternoon everyone wrote down a list of what they were going to buy with their bonus. And he wrote down that he's going to buy a Ferrari, and then he was going to buy a Ferrari for his girlfriend. This is like the height of like, you know, I'm going to be successful. And he never bought the Ferrari. It totally flopped. Febreze was actually the largest flop in Procter & Gamble's history, a company that's been around for over a century. They had spent more money on trying to get Febreze into a product than anything else, and nobody bought the stuff. In fact, they considered killing the product altogether. So Stimson goes in and he says, look, give us one more chance. We just want to figure out what's going on here. And he gets his team, and they come out here to Scottsdale, and they interview customers who had gotten free bottles of the stuff. In particular, the dime dropped for them when they interviewed this one woman who owned a couple cats. Now, I don't know if anyone in this room owns any cats. Go ahead, raise your hand if you own cats. A couple of people. Okay, so you know, cats have a certain scent about them that you grow to appreciate. This woman owned a huge number of cats. In fact, she owned so many cats that when the researchers walked into her house, one of them started gagging when he went into the living room because the scent of cat was so overpowering. But what was weird is that this woman's kind of a neat freak. Like everything was fine except for the smell of cats. So they sit down with her and they say, we sent you some bottles of Febreze. Have you used it? And she says, yeah, I used it a couple times. And they say, well, do you ever use it for the cat scent? And she says, you know, a couple times I've used it for the cat scent. And the guy who literally was just gagging says, well, what about right now? Would you consider using Febreze right now for the cat scent? And she kind of smiles and she says, you know, I don't like to brag, but I have the best cats. They hardly ever smell. which is, of course, when the team realizes what's going on, which all of you know, which is that if you have bad smells in your life, you become desensitized to them. They had built this entire advertising campaign around bad smells, but people who have bad smells don't know that they have bad smells, right? We spent our entire 7th grade year being in fear of the fact that we smelled bad and couldn't tell. You were right. You smelled terrible and you had no idea. So as a result, none of the marketing worked because the cue was something that people can't notice, and the reward is meaningless if you don't know that you have a problem in the first place. So they all go back to Cincinnati, where Procter & Gamble is based. And they go to their lab. Now, Procter & Gamble has the largest library of videotapes of people cleaning their homes on Earth. This is stock footage because P&G won't let me show any of the tapes. They're proprietary. But they started by watching these tapes of people vacuuming their homes. And what they noticed is this one woman in particular, she would take the vacuum and she would start in the corner, and she would start vacuuming backwards like this. And when she was done, she would go back to the beginning, and she would line up the wheels so that they were exactly parallel, and then come back so that there were these even grooves on the carpet. And then when she was done with the entire carpet, she just kind of looked at it and like smiled. And then, I'm going to show you my favorite photo of all time, because there's nothing I like more in the morning than having some special time with my daughter cleaning the mirrors throughout our house. I usually do my hair before we break out the scrubber. This is obviously a staged photo. But what they actually found when they were watching these tapes is that people had this ritual they would go through. When they were cleaning a mirror, they would spray the mirror with the spray, then they would wipe it like this, and then they would look at their reflection and smile at themselves, right? But you're laughing because you've done this. You know exactly what I'm talking about. What they figured out, what they realized, but nobody had really paid attention to before, is that cleaning had its own habits. Cleaning had its own rituals. And they figured out that to sell Febreze, they could piggyback on existing habits rather than trying to create a new one. So they go back and they come up with an entire new marketing campaign that's built around a new habit loop. This time the cue is, when you're cleaning, at the end of your cleaning ritual, pull out the Febreze and spray it so that you can make things smell as good as they look. Which, of course, there's no reward there because Febreze destroys scents. So they went back into the laboratory and they spent another $3 million inventing a perfume that was strong enough to withstand the chemicals of Febreze so they could pour it into the bottles. Then they go back to the same test markets, and these are the ads that they run.
Get your fix of freshness. Febreze. Anytime, anywhere. It's a breath of fresh air.
Shouldn't I be the one on the couch, doctor?
No.
Okay, that's good.
Get your fix of freshness. Febreze. Anytime, anywhere. It's a breath of fresh air.
Now here's what I'd submit to you. If you came over from China and you saw these ads and you had never met an American, you would think that we were a country that gets sexually aroused by smelling fabric, and that Febreze is a fetishist product that's designed to appease that. I'll also mention one other thing. The second ad, it's clear what's going on, right? There's like, she's a psychiatrist who is when they show that ad, when Procter & Gamble shows that ad on the coasts, everyone knows what's going on. When they show it in the middle of the country, it totally flops. People have no idea what is going on in that commercial. Anyways, they roll these ads out in the test markets, and then they end up going national with them, and it's a hit. Within the first year, Febreze sold $200 million worth of product. Today, Febreze is one of 13 Procter & Gamble products that's $1 billion a year product, right? Procter & Gamble has hundreds of products. Only some of them sell $1 billion a year, and Febreze is one of them. And if you ask them why, they will tell you because of these ads, because they created they piggybacked on an existing habit instead of trying to create a new one. In fact, the campaign's been so successful that now, a decade later, if you've seen the ads for Febreze lately, they blindfold people and they take them into these rooms that are disgusting and they can't smell anything. For the first time, Febreze can actually admit to people what the product does, which is it kills bad scents, instead of advertising it as the most chemically advanced air freshener on the face of the planet. But the reason I'm telling you this story is because you can grasp this understanding of how habits work, I think, to make the world a better place. And to give you an example of this, let me just tell you really quickly about Starbucks. Starbucks has this basic problem, which is that they sell customer service, right? They kind of nominally sell coffee, but what they actually sell you is that someone's smiling when you walk in. But to do this, they have to hire thousands and thousands of people who are 18 years old, who have never had a real job, and get them to deliver customer service. And what they found was that a whole bunch of people at the beginning of a shift could do a really good job of greeting a customer, and at the end of a shift they'd be exhausted. And if a customer comes in and they're rude back, or they get drawn into workplace drama. And this became a problem for Starbucks because they had a couple of incidents. And let me show you a tape of one of them. And before I show this to you, just imagine that you work for Starbucks, right? You spend as much as sometimes $100 million a year on advertising. You work really hard, you miss dinners with your kids, but you believe in Starbucks, you believe in teaching the brand that this is a place that you can come and relax. You come home, you turn on the television, and this is what you see.
She was a loyal customer of Starbucks, loved the coffee, loved the service, but that changed a few weeks ago. This native New Yorker got steamed, not by what was inside her cup, but something written on the outside. That's what she called Nina Pineda, and ordered a special brew of fully caffeinated 7 on your side.
And then when you looked at it, what'd you think?
I was shocked. I didn't understand why. Why would they do that?
Vicky Reveron is talking about this Starbucks cup. On the side, a Starbucks employee wrote what she ordered, a caramel frappuccino. But instead of scrawling her name on the side, she says he wrote the B word.
It says Vicky. My name is not Vicky, it's Vicky.
So if you've ever casually wondered what $100 million in advertising sounds like going up in flames all at once, turns out it sounds like, my name isn't beep, it's Vicky. This is a huge problem for Starbucks. Howard Schultz, who had just returned to being the CEO of the company after being chairman, calls together all of his executives because they have to solve this problem. And the way that they solve it is they decide that they have to increase workers' willpower. And to do that, they have to teach them new habits, willpower habits. One of my favorites is, in fact, something that they teach in their training manual called the latte method. And this is what it is. They tell employees, when an angry customer comes in, that's your cue. And you use latte, right, which they chose because it's Starbucks, which is you listen to their complaint. You acknowledge their complaint. You thank them for complaining. You take care of their complaint by giving them a new cup of coffee or whatever they want. And then you explain why this will never happen again. Now, I have a 4-year-old at home. I'm sure many of you have children. If I could teach my son that when I come up and I'm angry at him, he should listen to Dada's complaint and acknowledge, Dada, I understand that you're upset with me, and thank me, Dada, for yelling at him. If I could teach him the latte method, I think this kid would go on to be president. And in fact, in the book that you'll get tonight, there's actually the story of Travis, who's this kid whose mom was a prostitute, and his dad, the first time he saw him overdose on heroin, he was 7 years old, and he dropped out of school, and he got a job actually at McDonald's that lasted 3 hours because a woman came in and he thought she was rude to him, so he took the McNuggets out of her box and threw it at her head. This was a kid that basically life had failed and was destined to kind of be a failure himself. And then he started going to work for Starbucks, and he learned these willpower habits. And I actually talked to him a couple of weeks ago. He's the manager now of 2 Starbucks, and he oversees about 60 employees, about $1.2 million a year in revenue. He just signed his first mortgage. I guess the reason I'm telling you about this is because I genuinely believe that the companies that you work for, if you learn this science, if you try and share this science with your employees or with your customers, with your families or with your coworkers, you have this capacity to change lives. We understand now how habits work for the first time. When you teach people to diagnose the cues and the rewards in their life, you give them this tool to change these small patterns that they feel powerless against otherwise, including all of us. And I hope that this is something that is useful to you as you strive to make the world a better place. Thank you so much.